But moving now, and let's just decode the WEF report. And joining us for that, Akshay Joshi, who is the head of the Center for Cybersecurity at the World Economic Forum. And he will decode for us as to what really went into making this report and what are the larger implications. Thanks very much, Mr. Joshi, for joining us. My first question to you, cyber inequity seems to be a big sort of idea that is explored in this report. What exactly is cyber inequity? Because you say that's only increasing, and that gap between haves and have-nots as far as cyber resilience is concerned is only increasing.
Thank you very much for having me today. So essentially, I think cyber inequity is really a measure of organizations' ability to be cyber resilient. So there is a growing gap between organizations that we surveyed in terms of those who believe that they are leaders in cyber resilience as opposed to those that are struggling. So in terms of organizations that are not able to maintain a baseline level of cyber resilience. And this minimum viable cyber resilience, as it may be, is down 30% over the past 2 years. Each year we host an annual meeting of cybersecurity here at the World Economic Forum, and when we discuss the issue of cyber inequity with the nearly around 150 cyber leaders from across the globe who convened here, 90% of them were of the belief that urgent action is required to address this growing cyber inequity. So that's really very, very stark. Now, if you think about it, what does it mean? It means that large organizations that have the resources to be able to invest in cyber resilience are actually getting better. So their posture continues to improve. Whereas those that are the most vulnerable are not able to do so. And therefore, I think the gap is increasing significantly. Now, there are a number of factors that come into play, right? So it's not just your ability to be able to invest in cybersecurity, good cybersecurity. It's also about elements related to leadership buy-in, whether the leadership is bought in terms of investing in building cyber resilience.
Absolutely. And the report, the timing of the report perhaps is also extremely important. 2024 is going to be a fascinating year, more than 50 countries going to polls.
I think 2024 is an extremely pivotal year with roughly around 4 billion of the world's population going into elections, right? Now, if I take it in the Indian context, we publish a report called the Global Risk Report, which is based off a global risk perception survey. Misinformation and disinformation in the context of upcoming elections was identified as a number one risk by the respondents. Now, this is pretty significant, right? Because these risks are not new. We've been seeing disinformation and misinformation transpire over the years. We've also been seeing, how deep fakes can have certain impacts. With generative AI, the sophistication and speed at which you can create disinformation and deploy it has gone up. But having said that, I think it's not in the short term, while we may be facing the pain points in terms of the impacts of generative AI, it doesn't mean that the technology does not actually hold the solution in terms of better detection, in terms of being able to respond to such information at scale. AI technologies really provide a lot of potential. So I don't think it's fair to think about just the harms of technology, but also to think about the long-term benefits that responsible deployment and usage of technology can provide is pretty crucial.
Absolutely, and that is what the aim is, to make it more sustainable, make its impact more positive. But just looking at individual cyber attacks also, the report says that 8 out of 10 global executives feel vulnerable to cyber attacks. Why is cyber security and the cyber threat, larger and more pervasive than ever before?
So, if we go down to cybercrime as a whole, first of all, if you look at it from a cybercriminal perspective, the returns are extremely high. The risk as it pertains to attribution or even prosecution is relatively low. So there are no reasons to believe why cybercrime would not proliferate, right? As opposed to physical crime where the perpetrator is essentially within the same jurisdiction. In this case, the perpetrator might be actually in a different jurisdiction as a whole, which makes it extremely challenging to pin down. So if we work under the assumption that, I think cyber criminal activity is pervasive, then we need to think about what are the factors that make people more exposed. So one is the sophistication of threats. For example, we've seen phishing as being one of the most effective vehicles through which cyber attacks tend to proliferate, and people fall victim to it.
Absolutely, and the impact is something that affects all of us, people like you and me. Thanks very much, Mr. Joshi, for joining us.